All right, you guys can see my screen, right?
Mhm. Yeah, we can.
All right, cool. So today's training is going to be on extreme ownership and system thinking. What do you guys think that means?
Well, I see a little sub thing there, and it says how to stay in control when shit hits the fan. So extreme
Well, yeah,
ownership.
but what do you think system thinking means?
Well, I mean, extreme ownership means taking, I would assume, taking like a full accountability of all actions within your business and not looking for scapegoat reasons to blame for non-success or non-productiveness. And then system thinking, maybe like an analytical approach to pragmatically break down um, the methods that you have employed and maybe where there could be your own shortcomings
Yeah,
and improving
yeah,
upon
you're
those.
that's exactly right. So now let me ask you this though, extreme ownership just you mentioned with your business, just with your business, or is this a mindset that um, we can apply to other areas of our life?
I believe it correlates to everything, right? Because you can't build a house on a shitty foundation. So if your own personal habits are shit, your business habits are going to be shit.
Yeah, absolutely. So well, you explained that very well. What is extreme ownership? So it's basically everything's your fucking fault, right? Um, what is a good way to start taking ownership? If you were to break it down into me as an individual, what are the more obvious things that I need to do in order to take ownership of whatever situation I'm in?
Personally, I feel that like whenever I'm lamenting about a situation and trying to blame someone else, I'll pragmatically go back through my actions and think about where it was that I allowed that to occur or where it was that I made a decision that impacted the end. So I'll like
Yeah, so
reverse it.
that's getting more to the system thinking part of
Okay,
things.
okay.
So before all of that, like what is the first thing that needs to happen for you to take ownership?
Be like, this is my fault. This is my life.
By the way, you all can um, participate. I know everyone's got their, but yeah, everyone's welcome to participate. So what is the first thing that needs to happen for you to take full ownership, full accountability? It's more simple than you guys would think.
Yeah, blame
What
yourself.
is a value that a trait that you need to have as an individual to start taking ownership? You need to be,
You need to be responsible.
yeah, but even before that, even before being responsibility happens after this. I'm gonna give it to you guys. So you need to be truthful. You need to be honest. You need to be real with yourself. That's really the very first step. After that, then what you mentioned, you have to take responsibility. But before we take responsibility, we need to be telling the truth. And then we need to do something about it. Do you guys know who this guy is?
No.
Any guesses?
He's a reality TV show or something. He the I
He's a spokes. He's like a spokesperson. He
yeah,
looks as a spoke.
something.
He's very like
So
he guides people or
yeah,
gives
he
them.
looks like someone who's a leader, right? His name is Jocko Willink. So let me take you guys to a small clip from him.
Oh yeah, I recognize him there.
Here we go.
It's everybody else's fault. And therefore, I'm just a victim of what's happening. I'm just a victim of life. This is counter to the idea of extreme ownership. Because if you take extreme ownership, it's like, oh, my boss doesn't like me. What can I do to improve that relationship? My team isn't performing well. How can I help them improve their performance? My coach doesn't put me in the game. What can I do to get my coach to see that I'm worth putting in the game? My wife is complaining that we don't have what we need. What can I do to get us what we need? If you're blaming other people, if you feel that coming out of your mouth, stop it. Don't let those words come out of your mouth. That's the root of the problem. It's all a big acceptable lie. So be careful of this in your life. Please do me that favor and be careful of this in your life. It's not my fault.
All right.
It's
So,
everybody else's fault.
how is making everything your fault beneficial?
Because one, you try to like correct it and do it better, I guess.
Yeah. So what does that mean for you as a person? What does that do?
Like you take accountability for your own action. You're not blaming other people for your failures, and you know that hey, things didn't work out because I didn't do the due diligence to make it work.
So it puts
But
you
that's good.
in a place of control, right?
Yeah, I would say it gives you absolute power. It can make you bulletproof if you approach it correctly.
Exactly.
Or you also
So
have also have no excuses for yourself.
yeah. So it gives you power. If it's your fault, then it's within your control. You can change things. Why would not adopting this mindset be fatal to your success?
Well, I've
Pretty
seen
much the
people,
opposite.
yeah, I've seen people just become fatally stagnant where they consistently are just like, oh, well, it's because this, or oh, it's because that, or it's because these people don't come, or I don't have enough money, or I wish I could do that. And then you just drown yourself in the what ifs and the maybes and the lack of accountability that it's your choices on a daily basis that dictate the direction you go.
Well, the what if, I would say that that's more in the trap of procrastination, indecision, right? But so that is not taking accountability or not taking ownership of the fact that you're in an indecision mindset, that you're not actually taking action. That can be fatal to your success because you're left in indecision. But the extreme opposite is having that victim mentality, right? Where you blame everyone else and you blame other people. And blame removes power, right? When we blame other people or things outside of ourselves, we're basically giving them the power and we're telling ourselves things are fucked because of this situation or that situation, and there is absolutely nothing that I can do about it. So what does this mean for you? Should you blame yourself for everything that goes wrong in your life? It's not a trick question.
I guess to me, ultimately, yes,
Yeah, me too.
because yeah, I think ultimately, yes. Even if I go and am driving down the street and someone crashes into my nice, beautiful car, I chose to leave the house at that time to go do that thing. So ultimately, it was my choice to be there at that moment. So yes,
Okay. Yeah. Now, I'm going to challenge you guys a little bit on the way that we approach this though. So, I'm going to say no, but the reason why I'm going to say no though is and so here's why. We have to put things through a filter, which you just did. But the reason why I say no is that some people take extreme ownership to a point where they blame themselves in a very negative way, right? So it's like, oh, it's my fault. I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done this. And not only does that hurt your identity and the way that you view yourself as a person, which then furthers failure, because if you operate out of a mindset where you view yourself as stupid, then you're just going to manifest that, right? Because you're not stepping into the shoes of someone who if you believe yourself to be competent and to be someone who is a problem solver, then you're going to be the kind of person who solves problems. Your behaviors are going to follow the way that you view yourself, right? So our self-talk is very important, but how do we balance those two things? How can I blame myself for everything, but at the same time not blame my person, right? And that's what I mean by system thinking, which we're going to dive into here in a bit. But by putting things through a filter, we ask questions, just like you said, Tony. Was this completely outside of my control, or is there something I could have done to prevent this? Right? What exactly went wrong? What can I do to avoid this in the future, to get out of this situation, to make this better, to fix it? Let me tell you guys a story. So when I lived in apartments and I would get home late from work, I used to complain about the fact that, so let me give you a little bit of background before. So we used to live at these super nice apartments first that everyone had their own parking, and that never was an issue. And then they had raised the rent by like 250 or $300 within 1 year, and we decided to move somewhere else. And these apartments weren't as nice. They weren't luxury apartments. And when I would get home, I would complain about the fact that I couldn't find parking. And that type of thinking is how most people operate, which, what does that do for you? It literally makes your brain stop thinking of solutions. This apartment is like, this complex isn't taking care of its customers because, or its tenants, because there's not enough parking. You're giving yourself no power at all. And I began to create that awareness and catch myself. I don't like this. It's my fault that I'm in this situation. What can I do about it? If I don't like something, then what can I do to get myself out of this situation? How much money do I need to make so I don't have to deal with this? How much healthier do I need to get so that I don't have to deal with this? How much time do I need to create? Whatever questions you need to ask yourself, right? So I know in the last training, if you guys were there, we talked a little bit about NASA and how they approach failure. So what would NASA do if they built a rocket and it failed to launch? Would they say it's the rocket's fault? Would they say it's gravity's fault? Would they attempt to launch it again without changing anything? I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? I mean, the answer is no to all three of them. But they're not blaming themselves so we're going to dive into the system thinking. But does all of this make sense, guys?
Yes, it makes sense.
So they would figure it out, what went wrong, fix it, and run it again, right? So would they view this? So this is another thing that is also very important to having extreme ownership, is the lens through which we view things at the end of the day create the reality that we live in, right? So having beliefs that serve you to reach your goals is very important, because you can have extreme ownership and blame yourself for everything and still decide to view things through the lens of this is slowing me down, or I am I need to now go back to the drawing board and come up with a new solution. And you're viewing it through a lens of that doesn't actually serve you, right? So you're viewing it as a setback instead of progress, right? Another lens that successful people put on is that difficult situations are a test from life for you to get to the next level, right? That belief, that lens through which they view things serves them rather than, because there are going to be shitty situations that are completely out of your control. You know, you can't control the weather, you can't control time, we can't control death. I mean, we can minimize the chances of it, but I don't want to go off on a tangent on that. But we can control the way that we view things, and if we choose to have powerful, omnipotent beliefs that serve us, we become the captains of our ship. We become the creators, because I choose to view life in a way that if something is difficult, if I'm going through a hardship that was completely out of my control, then it was meant to teach me something. It was meant to mold me into the kind of person that I need to be to accomplish the things that I want, instead of viewing things as a setback. Any questions so far, guys? Comments, takeaways?
I think to an earlier thing I said about you can't build a house on a shitty foundation. I think that developing an in-depth understanding of what it is to really maintain a positive mental attitude is absolutely crucial foundation for the steps that you're also laying out. And as cliche or as cheesy as it may sound, having a glass half full type attitude versus a glass half empty is crucial. And I truly do believe that, you know, everything happens for a reason, whether good or bad, because there is always a lesson to be taken in how you apply what you've learned and move forward is building that foundation. All the failures, all the mistakes, everything that you may perceive as negative in the moment, you know, you have to like really sit there and pragmatically digest it and think about, you know, what lesson is this teaching me? How do I apply this moving forward? How do I not make this mistake again, you know?
100%. And, you know, speaking of foundation, the whole reason why we're having these trainings is because, and Tony Robbins said it beautifully in one of his last webinars or seminars that he had. And he talked about how most people try to search for, so he broke it down in 3 S's. Most people try to search for strategies. What is the strategy that I need to build a successful business? What is the strategy that I need to build to get healthy, to build a successful marriage? And there's 2 S's that come before that. And the 2 S's that come before that is the stories that you tell yourself. So, and the other one was I forgot exactly what word he used, but it was your state, right? The state. So those are foundational, and most people don't think that they are. They try to do the strategy that will get them there before fixing their state, fixing the stories. And what are the stories that we tell ourselves? You know, I don't have X, Y, and Z because I was born with the wrong genetics, or I was born from a family that was poor, and the cards that I've been dealt with are what's keeping me here. And those limiting beliefs, if we don't change the stories that we tell ourselves, we're always going to be limited by that. And the state, you know, us actually being able to control our state and being able to change our identity rather than change the behaviors first is foundational to you being able to sustain a strategy that takes a different kind of person. You can't put an engine or try to run the engine of a Ferrari if you still have a Mustang. You know, so if you learn that the strategies of building your successful business require for you to do things like I need to track KPIs, I need to inspect, and I need to, there's a million things that you need to do, right? But if your caliber isn't at that level yet, you're going to crash and burn. And if we tie it back to, I've talked about the thermostat thing, right? If you don't see yourself as a fit person, for example, first, rather than I'm going to do the things that fit people do so that I can then think of myself as the fit person, is your thermostat is always going to bring you back to baseline, because we have this cognitive dissonance between the actions that we're taking and the person the standards that we have about ourselves. So when people do get in shape, they do lose some weight, they almost feel like this gap where, well, now I have all this room to play around. I can kind of take my foot off the gas for a bit because I've always been this 250-pound person. So I've lost 50 pounds. So, but if you were the kind of person that was 180 pounds shredded and you got to where that other person is, they would not feel okay, and their thermostat would kick in. So I went a bit on a tangent there, but let's go back to the extreme ownership part and the system thinking. So here we go. So we talked a little bit about how do we start taking extreme ownership, right? So we mentioned that the first step was telling the truth, right? Another way to look at this is even before that is actually awareness, right? So you becoming aware of your reactions to life. How do you react when shit hits the fan? Do you instantly feel like a victim, or do you start pointing fingers? So start catching yourself. And one way to very effectively monitor yourself is not through your thoughts, because I used to ask myself this question, well, how can I possibly monitor every single one of my thoughts when we have thousands and thousands of thoughts every single day? So what do you guys think we can use as a tool to actually monitor them a little bit better?
In what sense? In like catching negative thoughts, or in like,
Yeah, like how can you start catching those victim mentality thoughts, those beliefs that don't serve you? whenever you start blaming other people? What is a good way to monitor?
I mean, I would say from my perspective and what I've learned is to really familiarize yourself with positive rhetoric and maintain again back to like that positive mental attitude. And the second you realize that you're berating yourself or you're feeling bad for yourself, literally like be like, no, bro, like it's not, I had you know me very personally, and you know a lot of things that I've been through recently and how easy it was for me to be a victim, and then how you even commented on it yourself, like, but it just takes time to you have to listen to yourself, and when you start going down a negative path or a dark thought, you have to literally just stop yourself and be like, no, like I'm not gonna allow my day to go in this direction. That's the
And
only way I've really found.
you were right on the spot. You mentioned it's your feelings, right? Your emotions. It's a lot easier to monitor emotions than to monitor thoughts. So that's like your safety valve. The second you start feeling, you cannot be in a good state and having negative thoughts at the same time. It's just not possible. When you're having negative thoughts, you don't feel good. When you have victim-like thoughts, you don't feel good. So your feelings will tell you, like, oh shit, that's a funny thought. And that's almost like the second step. It's don't, so this is probably almost like a juxtaposition or an oxymoron. Well, not an oxymoron, it's ironic, but don't take ownership of those thoughts because they're going to happen. We've built click and run programs that have been running for so long. Don't feel bad that you're having that those negative thoughts interrupt your day. They're gonna happen. They happen to me all the time. They happen to all humans. We're wired that way, and we've already built these click and run programs. It's not stopping the thoughts. It's catching them and saying, that's a funny thought. It's not mine though. I don't take ownership of that thought anymore. So, like I mentioned, so those programs will continue to get triggered. If I were to dive deeper into this, if you study psychology, you can't override it. They're gonna trigger before you can even think about them, because when certain patterns or certain programs in your brain run, there's a shortcut where information gets to your amygdala first before it reaches your neocortex. So, but it's just slowing down that filter before you actually react, is taking a few seconds and then creating and becoming aware. You'll notice, like, the first step is throughout your day, you're going to notice, I am having another one of those thoughts. I'm being the victim. I'm blaming other people. I'm doing things or thinking things that don't serve me. And just don't let them run. They're gonna start, they're gonna kick in, they'll get triggered, but they're not yours anymore. Then step 2 is to take full responsibility. But like I mentioned before, be careful with your self-talk. Blame your operating system, not your person. Negative self-talk labels your identity, and we always want to keep our identity aligned with the type of person that can achieve the results that we want.
Real
So
quick, I'm sorry
go
to
ahead.
interrupt, but can you expand on that? Blame your operating system, not yourself. Can you just kind of
Yes.
explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So if you're almost going to take on this role of a detective or a scientist, where you, like you mentioned it earlier on the call, if you can actually track your steps back. So for example, I am someone who used to really battle with binge eating, and it's something that is still very wired in my brain, where when I get stressed, my coping mechanism was to get reward from food. So when I get stressed, my hormones instantly start kicking in. My hunger hormone goes up, and I begin to even I begin to crave all these different things, and I just want to eat, right? So I already know what the triggers are because of becoming this scientist or detective for so long, where instead of blaming me and saying, fuck, I did it again, let me just start over and try to launch this rocket the same exact way without actually changing anything, without tracking my steps back. When instead, I begin to ask myself questions. I wonder what went wrong in my system this time. What did I do? And I know triggers for me is um, I try to avoid staying up too late. Another thing is if I try to avoid having, well, I don't try. I don't have things available at home that are highly processed or sugary because I know that just, out of sight, out of mind, and that's just the way that I operate. There's certain things that I know that I can't have. It's almost like the addicts to, if you look at someone who's addicted to alcohol, people love to say that, well, why don't you just quit? Like, all you have to do is stop doing it. And it's not that simple. It's the human, the if we're talking about appetite, for example, one of the strongest forces in human nature is its appetite, the desire to eat, and it's a survival instinct. So if you combine that with a click and run program and you try to fix that with willpower, you're going to fail every time. You can use willpower to build new habits, but using willpower to break old ones is a horrible, horrible strategy. What you have to do is to become an analyst of your own behaviors and figure out what triggers me, how can I build an environment, and how can I align my identity to someone who doesn't do those things, and create a system that suits me, right? And it's just tracking all of your steps back, journaling, if that helps you. I wear a Whoop, and I have a journal that it asks me certain questions every day. You don't have to go to that extreme, but it's just becoming a detective rather than just blaming yourself and then trying to get back on track, down, and instead saying, I failed again. So what went wrong in my system? What did I like? What else do I need to check? And then try something different. It's like becoming a scientist. Like Edison built the light bulb. I think he did like 2,000 different ones that failed, but each one wasn't a failure. It was just getting one step closer to one that did work. Does that make sense? Does that kind of?
Yes.
But what about you guys? Does any questions on that? Does that kind of make sense? What I mean by blaming your system rather than your person?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And if you're looking at this from, I know Marvin knows coding. If I ask you, Marvin, if you, what do you do? Python, JavaScript, what do you do?
Pretty much a lot of them, Python, Java. Um, I mostly work
Okay.
with Kubernetes, so it's all different language. But I am do with those as well.
So let me ask you this: if you have a wrong character, and but you can have the entire coding for a function right, but if you have one wrong character, what happens?
Will not compile.
Exactly. So if that's what it looks like when you continue to approach fixing bad habits with just willpower without becoming this detective and studying your own triggers, your own behaviors, becoming aware and changing your identity. If you're just, and that's what happens to most people, is that they just blame themselves and they say, oh, I'm this, I'm weak. Like, I just need to get disciplined. And it's really not. I've seen extremely disciplined people who are very successful and they're still, they might be overweight. So it's not a discipline issue. It's you continue to run the same program with a wrong character and it's going to fail every time instead of you actually going back and inspecting it. Where do we leave off? So extreme ownership only works if it empowers you. It should give you a sense of control. Insulting yourself does neither, right? And step 3, this is what I talked about. So become a detective or a scientist. This is where you ask quality questions. So you can come up with quality solutions. So you audit yourself, your behaviors, your environment, your decisions. Become a student and assess everything. You become a problem solver. So if there's anything in your life that you're dissatisfied with, my question is, what are you going to do about it? Right now, if it really is out of your control, if there's absolutely nothing that you can do, the question I ask myself is, well, how will complaining make it any better? If it's already out of your control, there's nothing that you can do about it, then do yourself a favor, accept it, and move on. You know, when you have cards that you've been dealt with and you lay them all on the table and there's clearly one best option and you pick the best option, it serves you in no way to complain about why you don't have the things in the card that was on the very right. Because at the end of the day, you're the one that picked that card because it was the best option that you had. And you knew that it was better than having the things on the 6th card, right? So why would you complain about not having those things when you had them on the table and you knew that if those cards were swapped, you would actually be in a worse situation, right? So that's another framework that I always like to think about. Is one of my mentors likes to say, life is a negotiated settlement. There's always going to be some sort of negotiation where you don't get everything that you want. And you being okay with that if you knew that you made the best decision that you had with the cards that you were dealt. So action item this week is, I just want you guys to catch yourself once a day, or however many times, and they blaming the outside, blaming people that are, or things outside of yourself. Write down what happened, what part was within your control, and what system failed. And now before we end this call, I just want to show you guys another way to look at things from like a system perspective. This is something that I also like doing with, this is something that I did because this is a little system that I run through my head whenever I'm engaging into things that don't necessarily get me closer to my goal. So the first question is, like, this is what a system looks like, right? So then the first question is, does this get me closer to my goal? If the answer is yes, continue. If the answer is no, then I ask myself the question, is it more important than my goal at this moment in time? If it is more important than my goal at this moment in time, then I continue. So there can be things that can be more important than your goals. If, For example, I have a loved one that all of a sudden is in the hospital and I need to be with them, then that ultimately will become more important than my goal in that moment, right? But if the answer is no, then the next question is, can I stop and do something that gets me closer to my goal? So if the answer is yes, then continue. If the answer is no, then I'm going to really check myself and ask myself some ridiculous question like, well, were you kidnapped by aliens or did someone put a gun to your head? Because I get this all the time, like, well, I'm at a wedding and it's not like I can just leave. Really? So then if you're at a wedding and well, it's because I have my wife and kids, and if I leave, I would look like an asshole. But this doesn't get me closer to my goal. Then you're ultimately saying that you being there for your wife and kids is more important than your goal. Then okay, then continue, right? So it's like it just takes you back to the same loop because at the end of the day is your choice. Unless you were actually kidnapped by aliens or someone put a gun to your head, then no one's really forcing you to be anywhere or to do anything than yourself. So it's just really giving yourself a reality check, and if the answer to this is no, then it just takes you back to the same loop. Is it more important than my goal? Right? If the answer is yes, it is, then good luck. I don't know what to tell you if you were kidnapped or if you guys know what I mean here, but this is like the kind of thinking that if you put programs in a computer, that there's a very simple set of solutions. Is this something that I could have controlled? No. Okay, well, accept it and move on. Is this something that I could have controlled? Yes. Okay, then what am I going to do about it? And it's just, that's what I mean by system thinking. All right, guys, takeaways, feedback. Any takeaways from this training? You're muted, Tony.
I think the one thing that was interesting about the whole blame your operating system, not yourself. I'm always taking notes every time I come to these, right? And I was thinking that like a good like metaphor is almost like think about like when the dam breaks, right? And your town is downriver and the river comes to flood. Are you gonna just like sit there and like watch the flood take you out, or are you gonna run away or build another dam to prevent you from repeating those actions again? You know what I mean? And I think like that's one thing that I struggle with sometimes, right? Is like when I'm having a bad day, it's like, well, fuck it, the day's gone. Like, or well, fuck it, I ate a whole box of Cub Scout cookies. You know what I mean? Like the diet's gone for the fucking day. Fuck it. You know what I mean? And literally happened. But but yeah, like so it's all about catching yourself and knowing that like I know better, but it is years of negative conditioning, right? That has me sometimes make these mistakes, but that doesn't define me as who I am as or who I perceive myself as, and that was a very interesting point.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the cookies is like, one way that I use also to stop my binge eating behaviors was, well, if I made a purchase that I thought was a waste and I spent $20 on something or $100 on something that was broken, I wouldn't go and then just like throw away the rest of my savings because of it or spend money impulsively because fuck, I messed up on this $100. Let me go out and spend thousands on something else that doesn't work, right? Why would you do the same thing with your nutrition, right? Or with anything else? So just because I ate something that was not necessarily the best thing that I could have ate, why am I gonna then go ahead and finish the entire box? You know, feeling like, oh, I messed up today, I might as well mess up the rest of the day, right? But there's so much more to it. Like I mentioned, there is a lot more going on there than just the behavior itself. It's the reward system that we have, and the, you know, the coping mechanisms that we've built. They're difficult to break. You know, with binge eating disorders, it can actually become almost like a drug, very similar to a drug addiction. And especially when we have those coping mechanisms linked to high levels of stress, and there's actual physiology that's going on inside your body. But you knowing that and having that awareness is like the first step, because not, then you can start thinking like, am I really hungry, or am I just stressed right now? Is this an accurate response to the situation that I'm in right now? And so that puts you in the perspective of like, well, I know now that I know why I feel hungry, and I know that this is like a genetic wiring that doesn't serve me, but my body thinks that it's a good way to survive, and I need to fix that. So I'm in this awareness state, right? And then if we tie it to the identity, like what kind of thoughts can I write down that I read every day, affirmations, something that I can set myself in when I step into the shoes of this person that will serve me. Well, some of my affirmations were, I think I actually still have them. I can read them to you. Some of those were, here they are. It was: stress signals for me to focus and get to work, and it kills my appetite. Fasting reduces my stress. Actually, I removed my, because I didn't want to say that it was my stress, and helps me formulate solutions. So those are omnipotent thoughts, you know, and you continuing to say that, your subconscious is incredible. And the things that it can do for you, you start acting congruently to what you believe you are. And so whenever I get stressed, I would actually think like, I can actually solve this problem that I'm stressed about faster if I just fast right now, because all the blood is going to be in my brain rather than in my stomach. So that belief system was serving me. Any other takeaways, guys? All right, y'all. So next week we'll do another training. You guys already know the action items of this week. So start catching yourself having these victim thoughts, blaming things outside of yourself. You know, something that's completely out of your control, then don't stay in that pocket of complaining, right? Because it doesn't do anything to solve things. It doesn't help you in any way. All right, guys. Thank you all. See you guys next week.
All right.
See
Thank
everybody
you.
later.
All right.
You guys have a good one.